Hi, my name is Sean Donnelly. I have a background in education and I work at the forefront of marketing and innovation, where I spend a lot of my time identifying and analyzing the skills that professionals need to succeed. One of those skills that a lot of, certainly in the marketing profession, people talk about is learning. So I'm going to talk to you about effective and durable learning backed up by empirically validated research. Metaphorically speaking, your short-term memory can hold the contents of around a post-it note, but your long-term memory can hold information equivalent to a NASA supercomputer. But the pathway from short-term to long-term memory is the choke point in the brain. But anything that we want to understand and remember long-term has to pass through that. And that's, I guess, the process that we might call learning. Now, the goal of this presentation is to mine the science of learning and equip you with three learning principles and three learning tactics that you will be able to use to optimize the transfer of learning from short-term into long-term memory. So principle number one, human beings forget exponentially. So this is Hermann Ebbinghaus. He was a German psychologist, and he spent his time trying to memorize random syllables and then measuring how quickly he would forget them again. And he observed that memory decays very quickly within the first few hours, and then within the first few days after learning something. And he charted his findings in what has since become known as the forgetting curve, which you can see here in front of you. Now, this phenomenon poses a big challenge to us as learners, because if we want to learn something, we also want to remember it. So here's tactic number one. We can interrupt the forgetting curve and move new knowledge from working memory into long-term memory by testing ourselves. It turns out the act of retrieving memories is a far more effective way of learning and interrupting the forgetting curve and stabilizing memory than re-exposing ourselves to the material again in the form of rereading or rewatching or re-listening. And you'll observe in the image here that it's really important to space out that retrieval. So what do we mean by that? That means studying, for example, for say uh, an hour over a day over 5 days rather than one day doing 5 hour study. Now, why is that? Well, there's just no getting around it. Moving learning from working memory to long-term memory takes time, and we'll come back to the concept of time shortly. And then finally, we've got the concept of desirable difficulty. So it seems intuitive, but the harder you need to work to remember something, the bigger the spike in storage and retrieval capacity. So while testing yourself rather than rereading might seem more difficult, it actually leads to more durable learning. And let's not forget, even though it is more uncomfortable than rereading, it's actually a lot quicker than going back over all of those old notes. Learning principle number two. If I asked you, could you draw the frame of a bike with the chain and the pedals? Well, researchers in University of Liverpool, they asked people to draw a bike, and nearly half the people drew bicycles that just wouldn't function. Drawings show pedal and chain errors in pictures A and B. In frame C, or picture C, we've got frame and chain errors, and we've got the triple combination of frame, pedal, and chain errors here in D. So if you think artistic skill might have been a factor here, well, participants work each other's pictures to identify the ones that correspond to the word bike, and the result was only 40% of the participants um, could do it. So what, you might say? Well, I think this is a really nice example that shows that we need to beware of what we call the illusion of explanatory depth. What do we mean by that? It's an illusion that plagues people into thinking that they know things better than they actually do. And it can manifest itself in things like poor exam and poor work performance. And you can overcome the illusion of explanatory depth, or maybe let's call it the fluency illusion, by acknowledging the complexity in something. And when you can acknowledge the complexity, then you can recalibrate your confidence and be open to learning again or relearning that material. So, Nobel Prize winning physicist Richard Feynman, he used to dispel the illusion of explanatory depth by teaching the topic using this little framework. Number 1, choose a concept that you want to learn about. Pretend you were teaching it to a 5-year-old. So this is where elaboration comes in. By elaboration, we just mean teaching something in your own words, because it's way more effective than rereading again. And remember, you don't actually need to know pausing. Remember, you don't actually know your subject until you can explain it succinctly. And then we'll identify the gaps in your explanation. So whoever you're teaching, they'll soon let you know if they don't understand. And then if you can't help them understand, then you need to review the topic and find a better way to explain it. So the best bit about this is that you don't need to have mastered the topic before you try to teach it. So this is the real key thing to think about. Teaching actually helps with the learning. In fact, there's a whole load of research that suggests that when people are in the act of teaching, that's when the topic reveals itself to them, because teaching really enforces or really forces them to move past surface understanding. To become a master in your field, you need to be born a genius, right? Well, maybe not quite. Turns out intelligence is broader than it is currently defined, because people can be intelligent in different ways and in different settings. Also, the only things that IQ reveal is relative intelligence at a moment in time. It's a static measure, and it doesn't actually say much about our potential. And so it's not the same thing really as ultimate intelligence. So the lesson here is that to become a master in whatever the field is, it's not a function of genius or innate talent. It's a function of focus and time applied to that knowledge. I'm going to say that again. It's a function of focus times time applied to that field of knowledge. And even with the best learning tactics, we talked about that choke point, moving learning from short-term memory into long-term memory. So our final learning tactic is actually just about using time effectively. So that is time to think and time to sleep. And we've got 2 modes of thinking, the focus mode and the diffuse mode, which bring different insights into our learning. So focused thinking is simple. Really, we're just talking about concentration and putting in the effort. So the 2 tactics we talked about already, testing and teaching, they're both focused modes of thinking, but it uses up your working memory, which can tire quite quickly. It's difficult to stay concentrated over a long period of time. So here's an analogy for you. If you go to the gym, think of the focus mode as the intense efforts that you put into going to the gym. There's only so many burpees you can do before your body gives up. So you need to follow that intense effort with intense recovery. And so you can trigger the diffuse mode when you're not employing your focus via your working memory. So you might go, well, okay, but how? So you use your diffuse mode when you go for a walk, when you take a nap, when you meditate, when you take a shower, or the ultimate diffuse mode thinking when you go to sleep. So diffuse thinking, it's really important because it is broader than the focus mode, and so can be really great at helping you connect new learning with existing knowledge. When you have ideas in the shower, for example, or when the answer to that pub quiz question pops into your head the day after the quiz, that's your diffuse mode thinking doing the work. You don't realize it's happening, but it's happening all the time. So to go back to the gym analogy, you've done your burpees, but then you rest. And the next time you go back to the gym, you'll be a little bit stronger and you'll be able to do a little bit more. So how do we deploy the 2 of those things together? I would suggest that you can use the Pomodoro technique. So for example, choose your topic or your task, focus deeply for 25 minutes on only that one thing, don't have any interruptions, and then let your diffuse mode go to work by taking a break for 5 minutes. Now, here's the really important bit. When you take a break, take a break. Have a Kit Kat, make a cuppa. You won't engage your diffuse mode if you spend your time scrolling Twitter or Instagram, because that's still the focus mode of thinking. Now, when you put it together, you can only use this tactic maybe 4 to 5 times before you need to take a longer break. The ultimate diffuse mode thinking, as we mentioned, is sleep. If you don't believe me, universities or researchers at University of California, they found that people who study in the morning have a 1 hour, excuse me, I'll start that again. People who study in the morning and then have a 1 hour nap and then do a test in the evening, it turns out they do about 30% better in the test than students who did the same learning, same studying, all other things being equal, but didn't have a nap. So there's your business case if you needed one for taking a nap. So yes, you can learn while you sleep. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to get a good night's sleep, and then tomorrow test yourself to see if you can remember the 3 principles and the 3 tactics that we just talked about. Put this presentation into your own words and teach somebody else how to learn. And the next time you're studying, focus hard, but remember to take breaks, because relaxed breaks supports learning, not the other way around, which sometimes can seem counterintuitive. And if you can get all that, then you can transform your learning, because you know what? Learning compounds. It's iterative. The more stuff you learn, the greater the ability you will have to learn even more. It's a cyclical process. So thanks very much. I look forward to hearing about your learning journey. And if you needed one more business case for learning, here's a little trite saying for you: learning potential is equal to earning potential. Thank you.